in those 3 towns was done by conditional use permit. The ADU requirements, we have the ADU thing. So I was, I guess, impressed by how much Peterborough does do already of the things that they talked about. But most of what I wondered is where we stand in the, in terms of already our sort of housing need assessment and our purchase price points and so forth. I was also just amazed that the median house price of a house in New Hampshire is $315,000. I would not have expected it to be that high. I mean, it's the whole state, so whoa. I know it's not an average, it's a median, but still. So I guess those are my impressions.
Okay, thanks. Who's next? Kate, did you want to go?
Let's see. Well, I have underneath here, I downloaded the handbook, went through it. And I mean, it was kind of striking to me that the innovative land use planning techniques, this is 2008. And I do feel sort of like Sarah, we're still struggling on some of these. So on page, I think it's 135, additionally, inclusionary ordinances can be supplemented by the incorporation of other initiatives that encourage affordability and variety of housing types, and these may include. And again, right in the very beginning, they said, which many of us have said, the inclusionary zoning alone isn't how you get affordability, but it's, as in Sarah used the word toolkit, it's got to be part of the toolkit. So just reading this list, so encourage affordability and variety of housing types, smaller permitted lot sizes, increased density, open space or cluster development, mixed use development, village plan alternative development, tax increment financing, public-private partnerships, manufactured housing, smaller dwelling units, housing for elderly and disabled, accessory dwelling units. And again, sort of the conversation about the planning board able to, in effect, use those incentives and also have the covenants. A little tag on, I mean, there's so much. I took kind of detailed notes, and I'd have to grind through it and see what it is. Karen's point, I think they somewhere said, we really don't know what the track record is with the inclusionary zoning. Because no developers had come to their town.
Right.
So and I said, we might have that same issue. Like, what developer is really coming here to say, I'd love to do this workforce development, multifamily or little village court here in Peterborough? It seems like this would be a great place to do this. Can we talk? A public-private thing or pitching a project. So there's that. Oh, then they talked about the flexibility with ADUs. I had a big star here. Permit the detached. Don't have a size restriction. Don't require owner occupied. Don't limit the number of bedrooms and things like that. So, yeah, and then the thing about master plan. So I was reading all that. Incentives to compensate the developer for the foregone profits, the market rate would have brought. I think that's something, those are the kind of conversations we have when people were upset with Woodman's, or things like that. I'm not quite understanding what the market rate pressures are for a developer and how you would get that affordability. You have to do it probably by bigger, more buildings on a smaller piece of land. So there's that. And then, finally, so I'm reading all that, thinking about that. And then I read, I'd love to have more conversation about what happened in Jaffrey. So they had a workforce housing proposal. It was a 2-to-2, what was it called? Hung thing. I don't have the newspaper in front of me. So it was the ZBA. And then it's like, well, that means the developer can come back and maybe try again in some different way with a smaller project. And I thought, well, this is almost like talking about the exact same thing. So I don't know the Jaffrey story, but I was curious about it.
Should we go to Joe and get the Jaffrey story?
It's up to her.
Are you willing?
Thanks.
Okay.
I actually had my hand raised on a couple of other points just to provide some background on inclusionary housing, but let's start at the end and go forward. The project was called workforce housing, but was not indeed qualified as workforce because the anticipated rental rates for the individual homes exceeded the criteria to qualify as workforce housing. And when I get done chatting, I'm going to send you the spreadsheet from New Hampshire Housing Finance that itemizes for each county what is considered actually workforce. So his rents were far in exceedance of that. So while the project may or may not have had merit, it was inappropriate to call it actually a workforce housing project. So I urge everyone not to be slamming Jaffrey for that. We're actually working closely, and this will be a good nexus. We're working closely with a company that is proposing bona fide workforce housing that meets the qualifications of income. And I want to help people understand that developers can't build, it's not financially viable to build workforce housing unless you have some assistance, some tax credits, financing assistance, bonding, and oftentimes these come through the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority and George Regan. So this is a company that's been working with them and also with the town, and we have a site that will be appropriate. The issue is the numbers. So minimum number of units would be 40, and he's looking for 70. So I, kind of put that in context. If in any one of our small towns, someone came in with a project of 70 units in 2 or 3 single buildings, I think, you're probably going to get some resistance to that. So it's what it looks like and how the numbers work, right? So let's just kind of go from where we started with Jaffrey. We are working, and actually the governor suggested this company come to Jaffrey because they know that we're friendly. Me with my work hat on, we're friendly and we're trying to do these kinds of projects. That said, I hate to admit to a certain extent that I was one of the editors on that land use, the innovative land use guide way back in the last decade. Just to be clear about the innovative land uses under 674-21, under the statutory authority, it allows inclusionary zoning, but, and that's the mechanism to provide bonus density for workforce housing. So when a company like the one that's going to, hopefully work with Jaffrey, when they come into town, if we have an inclusionary zoning ordinance or an area of town that we say, we're going to give you a high density if you provide workforce housing. And the workforce housing has to meet statutory criteria and New Hampshire Housing Finance. So we're going to give you that big bonus density so that you can do your higher density development on this parcel. So I want people to understand I think there's a little mixed semantics in terms of high density zoning, which may or may not have its merits in depending on where it is. High density zoning is not inclusionary zoning and is not a tool in the toolbox to promote workforce housing. So I think it behooves everybody to think about what kind of housing do we want in town, and density for density's sake may be a viable option. We may be trying to just increase our tax revenues. So that's perfectly fine. But in the long run, if we're trying to get some workforce housing, we need to be very proactive about it. We need to work with the developers. We need to work with developers that are familiar with these tax credits and these programs. So that's me on my soapbox, and I'll be quiet. I know Sarah's anxious to jump in.
Thank you.
I'm not really anxious. I feel like I understand that Joanne knows far more than probably I will ever know, but I feel like some of what she just said, some of it is your professional opinion, and people, there's no meanness here, but people can get a second professional opinion, or professionals in the same profession can hold different opinions. And I think some high density housing could be examples of inclusionary. Like, I'm not saying it's always mutually exclusive, but I feel like some of what Joanne just said is opinion, as is everything I say too. But I just think I feel like that's worth mentioning. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not trying to be insulting or rude or.
Yeah, and so to remember too that, you know, we're listening with open minds, right, to each other, and we're you know, speaking from our own experience, and we all have different experience. And I would say too, it was when I was watching the presentation, for me, you know, understanding the definition of, you know, workforce housing or affordable housing, and the rules around all of that in terms of the incentives that could be, like how you would define it, and how it had to be particular price points, and it had to hit particular income levels, and it had to, you know, I didn't know all of that. And I felt like that's good information because, and I really felt like the information about, you know, the kind of the deals that get made, that is to say the covenants, right? Where you would say to the builder, well, we're gonna give you all of these advantages so you can make this work for you financially. However, you know, the covenants are that, you know, these have to stay affordable, and they have to be, you know, they have to stay within a particular price point and for a certain number of years. And, you know, I think that's really valuable, and it's important information because, you know, the worry is, well, that something will get built and then it'll just get sold and the next person won't maintain it as affordable or workforce. So that was new learning for me. Carl, did you have something?
Yes, basically, Karen, that definition of workforce housing was new to me, and I've been sort of wondering what is the definition. So to see that there is in this state a clear definition and defined according to counties, and I don't know, maybe Todd can speak to that, whether it's more defined than just counties. It seemed like it was maybe kind of a mix or something more than just to county comparisons. But the other thing is, to me, this is the critical thing in this town. It is, how does this town figure out how to do zoning, which is going to provide affordable and even affordable. And I know I had a conversation with Nicole at one of our early meetings, and Nicole was saying Peterborough has, you know, property at the mid-high end, and it has property for low income that pretty much meets the need that's being asked for the town, but it doesn't have anything in between, the workforce housing model. Like we don't have that. So it's, to me, this is the critical thing. How do we accomplish that? How do we accomplish it? Because this is, I mean, I know it's not a new problem, but it is, you know, when I come to this town, I'm 28 years old, and now I'm 66. And when I was 28, there was a lot of affordable housing. I mean, it was not hard to find. And what is going to be the condition now that makes that a possibility in this day and age? Because I don't know. And one of the things that's interesting to me, they also said, was this workforce housing seems to be more for places that are not rural, but actually are feeder towns to more populous areas. And, you know, Temple Mountain has always been a barrier for this town. You know, to drive over Temple Mountain to go to work has been, it's been a knock on being able to do housing. I mean, because I'm a retired builder, I kind of know, you know, what's been going on in this town for a long time. And people aren't coming over here to do the kinds of development that maybe it's because of Millipore. And that is, you know, now they need to have that kind of workforce housing. Peterborough doesn't have a Millipore right now. We don't. So, I mean, we lost so much in the last few decades in terms of employers in this town, that where are the jobs coming from? Like, where are the jobs? So anyway, that was my takeaway from it.
Okay,
That was-
two hands. Thank you, Carl. So Sharon has her hand up, and Sharon's just joined us. So Sharon, you want to unmute yourself and jump in?
I just wanted to bring up, this came up with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee of the EDA. And when we looked at our zoning, because we were looking at a family district zone property, there are still some discrepancies in the zoning that I'm hoping should be addressed in the future. And one of them is in the family district, workforce housing is allowed, okay? But if you go to it says workforce housing subject to provisions of section 245-24.6. And if you go to that section, we have a contradiction that I would like to bring up that I think that going forward, everyone needs to be aware of. So I will refer to that. So 24-6 is our workforce housing ordinance. And last year in 2019, they added on that workforce housing is allowed anywhere where multifamily housing is allowed, which means that's only the general residence district. So I just want you to know that there are some things that need to be cleared up in the long run.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay. I saw Kate had her hand up, and then I want to make sure everybody has a chance to weigh in. So Kate.
You can go to somebody else if you want to.
Jim? I'll go to Jim and then Ed.
Okay. Just real briefly, and I'm pretty new to this in a literal kind of a studious kind of sense, but the things that I brought away from that were two things. One was the kind of clout that you need to give your planning board to be able to make a deal. And it seems like it wasn't as broad as, rezoning everything or something, but it was to say, we have this priority in this town and we'd like to be able to bring somebody in, just like what was said just a little bit earlier, what Joanne especially was saying, I guess having to do with putting some sort of thing together, making it attractive, and saying the other thing, the clout of what you said, Karen, was it needs to stay affordable. It can't just be this sort of panacea, oh yeah, we're going to do this great thing, and it turns out they're $400,000 units or something. That's, or maybe they drift upwards within 10 years because of the general desirability of this location and all that. So that's one thing. And then The other thing is always, as Carl indicated there, the regionality of it. I thought that came through pretty clearly. You can't just look at just one town and say, we've got a problem here. It actually is a lot of feeder towns. And like Carl said, he's been here since age 28. I've been here also similar age, but started out in New Ipswich. You know, that was 10 years of a house that was like half the price of most anything else. And we got our foothold, you know? So I think that kind of idea of it is a region and we kind of work together as a region in a lot of ways. So it'd be good to work together as small towns with Peterborough, sort of like the Convale district is defined. But I just think that's quite valuable to not just put it on ourselves.
Thank you, Jim. Ed?
Yeah, I talked to Pete Throop when they were approving the building all the units close together near the new Catholic Church.
Mhm.
And I said, you know, we talk about workforce housing. You're allowing all this density. Why don't you require 2 or 3 of those houses to be kept as workforce housing? And he said, we're not allowed to do that. So at that point, I just can't get it. If you can't do something as simple as that, then moving forward, unless you're dealing with something on a real big scale like Joanne was talking about, and you know, it staggers me that we couldn't deal with that.
Well, and Joanne, I see your comment. I'm wondering, but to Ed's point, you know, it's no, not coercing for sure. But if considerations are given, this is what I was hearing in the presentation. If considerations are given to a builder to make it work for the builder to be able to put the units in, then there are other considerations that could also be given on the other side for the town, whether that's affordability or something else. And I think that what Jim is saying, you know, this ability to make a deal or to find a win-win, I think we need to have more of those kind of conversations. And if we decide as a town our priorities, like as we're rewriting the master plan chapter, right, that the priorities for the next 10 years are these, affordable workforce housing being one of them, then there should be the ability to try to structure arrangements for building projects that meet those goals. That's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
Who else hasn't gone yet that would like to weigh in? I've got Kate wanting to weigh in again, but Todd, do you want to comment? And then I'll go to Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I had a similar reaction as that you did, Karen, that I was left wondering whether these examples actually worked or not. And, you know, as we are speaking here, I was starting to draft up an email to send to the 3 towns that were mentioned in the presentation to get a sense of whether they've seen any projects come through these processes set up by these workforce housing ordinance. And I would be happy to, you know, if I hear anything back from those messages, I'd be happy to share that with you. And I think that is critical information. It's meeting the letter of the law is one thing, and actually creating an environment where workforce housing becomes possible is another thing, I think. And just on the topic of assuring continued affordability, I'll just note that the New London, or I'm looking at the New London ordinance right now, and they have a provision in there that is aimed at making sure that these units remain affordable. And the way that they do that is they require that the developer retain some third party to administer, monitor, and enforce the binding commitment, you know, as approved through this ordinance. And what I think when I read that is, well, you've just added another cost to creating affordable housing. So I think that's, you know, kind of push and pull there. You know, we want to ensure that they're affordable, but at the same time, we want to make sure that these ordinances are working for developers.
All right, so I've got Kate and then Mark.
Oh, Mark hasn't spoken, so go ahead.
Want to wait? Okay, so Mark.
Let me unmute.
Good.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I think the cost of affordability and housing costs are really nationwide, and they depend upon the jobs that are available. And the more jobs that are available, the more housing is required in an area. And usually the higher, the higher cost. I think this COVID situation might be changing the lay of the land a little bit, in that more jobs can be done away from major cities. And that will create jobs. I don't know if, I forget who said, I guess, did Carl say that that's a big cost if you have to hire somebody to maintain the affordability? I mean, that is expensive. And coming from Jane and I lived in a place in New York that had a fixed price. And it became, after a while, almost impossible to maintain that, because the price was so much lower than all of the housing nearby. So so I don't know, these are a few things
Okay.
I'm just looking at a bigger picture, and I didn't look at this specific thing that well.
Thank you. I saw Stephanie. Let me do that and then come back to you, Kate.
I guess I'm also getting a little frustrated by how there are so many thoughts in my head, and yet, we're all trying to talk together, and hard to express it all. But the thing about the covenants and the maintaining affordability, I think is very important. And if you develop affordable housing and then you just let it go free market, it's not going to stay affordable. I mean, that's just the way of the world. So something, I mean, I guess I don't understand enough about covenants, and I know that there are covenants on property up on the hill above Ave Marie's, and it seems like the covenant is with the if it's a purchased house, it's in the paperwork of the house, and you have to follow that covenant. Is that, I mean, I guess I'm asking the question about, I think in a rental situation, if you want to maintain the rents at a certain affordable state, and the state has it very well defined. I really enjoyed seeing that definition. Then rental properties always have rental managers. So I don't really understand why that would be so hard for a developer to, I mean, they have to maintain something to maintain the development and to, sell the units and all that. So it seems like that shouldn't be a difficulty. And so isn't a covenant similar to that in terms of buying a house? So I'm not going to just go on. I would love it if somebody could answer those questions for me.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, and I just would tack on to say to that what I heard them say in the presentation was that it would be some kind of housing trust or something like that, that would oversee or ensure that the affordability was maintained, or that those covenants were met. We don't currently have a house. There's the Kentucky, but there isn't like a Peterborough Housing Trust or a Monadnock Trust, as far as I know, unless somebody knows about something else. Anyway, Kate?
Yeah, so that's kind of good that I'm going to go backwards. I'm not going to try to tell anybody about covenants because I don't know, but I mean, I do know a little bit about it, and I got a sense from that, the presentation of ways in which it fits in here. And again, just by sort of weird happenstance, I was walking with somebody who lives in a place. Now I'm going to say it's in Cambridge, and everybody doesn't have to say, but Peterborough is not Cambridge, but it gives an idea of the place. It's one of those traditional larger homes that now you don't have just by yourself in Cambridge anymore. It's now 4 units, and she owns her unit. And it has that exact same covenant. I didn't know I was going to be reading this thing and hearing about covenants, but so she was explaining the way it relates to the market value. So it's basically, she can't sell it for $1 gazillion, even if that's what you could sell something for in Central Square because of the covenant. So it has created a kind of I guess you could say almost an anti-gentrification force, so that people are living comfortably in this house. So anyway, so that's just a story. So the next thing has to do with, I think, and I've watched us do this over the space of this whole task force, is understanding that affordable, as in affordable housing, has a very locked in definition, and we can get those numbers. And then I think in our heads, and I'm sort of listening to the way Carl was talking, we also have affordable with air quotes in it. So affordable for more people than just the very rich or the very poor. And I would say we know there is demand for that, even if there aren't, even if we aren't Millipore. And I go back again to, we've heard this before in George's presentation, and then it was one of the first things in here, which is, statewide, something like 20K at least, or maybe 30K new units needed. We have not been building, and we've heard that. So that is one of the ways in which is we create some of that middle. It helped that some people can afford. It's not affordable housing as in affordable housing, really affordable housing, but it creates a better mix. And particularly because we have such pressure on the rental market. I mean, we are hearing that again and again and again, and that was in here too. What was it, like there's 1% vacancy or something like that? So you need to have places that are a little bit more in flux. You need a little more supply so that you can have more rental. The rental is such a problem. So anyway, I think about that. And then the conversation about region, I mean, it was interesting because when they were talking about it in the film, they were talking about the target town and then the tiers around it. And I would agree that had to do more with like Exeter and so forth. So that had to do with, again, with a fairly specific way they were looking at regional accommodation and regional numbers of some medians. And then the last thing, and it relates to my point before, the shortage, is they spoke about this. And again, Carl, you were kind of saying the same thing, that in the 80s and 90s, everything was about growth management. Okay, so managing growth. Growth management was the thing. Land use litigation, controlled growth, that was the 80s and 90s, and I think it's a different time now. And so, of course, you still need to control growth in some ways, but we now have, I would argue, a shortage, like we've stalled in terms of building. And as Mark said too, we know this is a national problem. But as we're learning this week, we have national problems that we also have here. There are version of the national problem, but I feel like that is one of the problems that we have here, that we're not creating capacity. And again, we have to still talk about workforce, affordable, and maybe, maybe we can get some federal money for this. I don't know, but okay, end of soapbox for me.
Yeah, and it just does point to, we talked about in previous meetings, we talked about that mobility, right? The ability to start somewhere in a house or an apartment and be able to move through the housing stock. Like when I was first married, bought that little house that was like not much of anything, but I could afford it. And we built equity from there and were able to then buy the next better house and took that equity and bought more. But there's no way for people to move in our current stock, right? It's like, even if you do have a small house, like, where's the next move, right? And I feel like we don't have enough of that available to make that work. So my point of view. Libby, you had your hand up?
Do we have any of these numbers, like our the purchase and rental price points?
Oh, yeah.
Fine for workforce and the inventory
Yeah.
in Peterborough of any of these things? I mean, I'm not saying we don't have a problem, but I think our discussion would be so useful if we could sort of put some actual data either to Peterborough specifically or the region. I mean, I agree this is a regional issue, but we're sort of working on a Peterborough master plan to lead into a new zoning ordinance. So that's very specific. So it's, I guess we all sort of have this anecdotal feeling. We know people who can't buy a house, or we know new houses that have come on the market that seem expensive. But if I wish we would have some real data, such as was, anyway.
Okay, I've made a note.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I just wonder, Storm, Lisa, your hand's up, but Storm, as someone who's moved to Peterborough recently, any comment you want to make on trying to find a place to live?
Yeah, it's been like pretty much impossible to find any apartments that are affordable, especially on minimum wage in this town. And I work here full time, and it's honestly like I feel like I'm doing the impossible right now, which is paying for rent in Peterborough on a Peterborough wage. Yeah, it's incredibly hard to find apartments here. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say.
Okay. Didn't want to put you on the spot, but I just thought it'd be good to hear. Lisa? Thank you.
So if you want to know the inventory, currently there are 24 homes listed on the MLS in Peterborough. There's one condo at 199. All the rest are over 200,000. And then there are 4 properties over $1 million. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 properties over 400,000. Between 400,000 and $1 million of the 24. So 12 are over 400,000.
What's just out of curiosity, the rental market? Because I just looked at Zillow, and Storm, I hear what you're saying. There's nothing, it seems like, on the rental market available.
So in order to list your house, like if you had a 2-family and you want to list your house on the MLS, you'd have to pay a realtor, right, to do that.
Okay.
And so there's no reason to pay a realtor. I mean, I hate to say that because I'm a realtor, but there's no reason to pay a realtor in today's market, because you can go onto Facebook and put a picture of the kitchen and say for rent $1,000, and you will be overwhelmed by the amount of people that contact you. So it's really, there's hardly ever anything listed on the MLS for rent.
Okay.
Got it. So we have 8 minutes. Who haven't we heard from that would like to chime in? Anybody? Is that you, Jim?
Yeah, I just had one thing to say, is that I just heard a house sold in my general neighborhood here. I think it was in the 350 range or so listing, and he got bidding war in one day of listing and sold it for an extra $25,000. So that just shows the trend of this marketplace, not only being tight, but boom, 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 it's going to elevate prices. So.
Yeah. Okay. Joanne. And then Ed.
Yeah, hi. I just had, Jim, you triggered a thought for me. We kind of saw this, it's kind of like a little microcosm here in Peterborough of the housing boom that we had leading up before the recession, right? The same thing happened to my mom when she was selling her house, that there was a bidding war upping the price for the house. And I wonder, to a certain extent, there are larger demographics affecting us that need to go into the formula that we, Karen, that you're putting together for our housing. Is we're a great place to retire to. And so part of, not to be oppositional to immigrants or migrants from other states, but we are an attractive place to retire to, and people can come here with, thinking that a $350,000 or a $400,000 house is really quite a bargain compared to where folks are coming from. So I think that's an important factor, and Peterborough is a great place to come and live. And maybe we think of ourselves more as some of the communities in the North Country that are tourist communities where the workforce housing is being scooped up by seasonal folks and Airbnbs and again, folks from away who are buying their second home and not actually even using it. So I just think that's an important factor for Peterborough, and it's interesting to me because I work in Jaffrey and I see a different kind of pressure on housing than I do see here.
Thank you, Joe. Ed?
Yeah, Karen, I'm going to have to quit quickly, but could you talk a little bit about next steps?
Sure, yeah. We've been doing, so as far as we know that there'll be some lifting of the stay-at-home order next week. However, we also know that we have cases still have COVID. We have not heard anything so far about being able to gather in groups greater than 10. So for the time being, we're assuming we're still going to be meeting by Zoom for the next meeting, as far as I know. So we're on this format for maybe one more, maybe two more, I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball, but right now, this is what we've got. I know it's not perfect, but I felt like we had a pretty good discussion tonight. And I took a lot of notes and can help move some things along. So if everybody's okay with our doing this in a month, that would be the next step. So does that sound okay?
Okay, thanks.
Generally? Okay, so I will send out a doodle poll again to try and find a date. And tonight Monday night we ran into a planning board meeting, and tonight we ran into a ZBA meeting, and I'm trying to find a time that works, but it's not always perfect. So we get us tonight. It's a good turnout tonight, so I really appreciate everybody making the time to come together. Okay, so 3 minutes. All right, we're going to do a quick round the horn, one word that you want to leave the group with. Just take a minute before we jump off, and I'll call your name, and you just, what do you want to leave? What gift? We'll do it this way. What gift do you want to give the group in a word? So just take a minute and just think about that. Take 20 seconds. Okay, so my word is peace. Libby?
Hope. Oh, mute. Sorry.
You're on. You're on. You're good. Ivy?
Erosion.
Okay. Jane and Mark?
Optimism.
Positivity. Kind of the same thing.
Lisa?
Peace.
Okay. Todd?
Justice.
Jim?
Broadness.
Broadness. Elijah?
Creativity.
Creativity. The rest of you have to take yourselves off mute to do this. Stephanie?
Pandora's box.
Sarah?
Sorry for 2 words.
Sarah?
Tired.
Joanne?
Perplexing.
Rosemary?
Clarity.
Clarity. James?
Information.
Kate?
Work.
Storm?
Discomfort.
Mandy?
Compassion.
Sharon?
Socioeconomic diversity.
That's many words.
Only 2. Only 2.
Lisa?
I already went, but peace, peace.
Peace. I'll take it again. Carl?
Yeah.
Nicole, as in we need her next time.
We do. We do. Did I miss anybody? Okay. Well, thank you all for making time tonight. Thank you all for your participation. Really appreciate it. And please stay well and stay connected and be good people. Always. You are. I love you. So what I want to say is I love you. Thank you for being here. And I'll be in touch.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Good night.
Good night.
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 Good night.